We're about to lose this republic for our failure to secure the border, enforce our laws, and have a moral compass. And again, Mama Tom's response is, when she knows the borders get too unsecure, but more secure than it's ever been, what is her response? After Rob Prince's murder, after terrorists and trained assassins into Pinal County put up a sign 30 miles from Phoenix, Americans stay out. A lot of things have to change, and they start right here. I want to thank you. God bless you. May God continue to bless this great republic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. A great patriot. I want to, before I introduce our guest speaker, I want to thank the volunteers who helped put this together. Volunteers, wave your hands in the air. I want to thank staff. Our staff, raise your hands in the air. And volunteers for staff. I want to thank the church for being so flexible with allowing us to pretty much do this the way we wanted to do it, and we felt it should be done. I want to thank Chairwoman Jenny White from LB20 and her son James, who were out here videoing and photographing. Where are you, Jenny? James, her son wears the greatest hat. I don't know where he is. Oh, there he is, without his hat. And finally, I'd like to recognize Lisa Benson, who was great to put this thing together, and I really do appreciate Lisa. Okay, now what you're here for. It is a great pleasure to host the esteemed author, activist, and freedom fighter, David Horowitz, everybody. David Horowitz. Okay, David Horowitz's political experience includes the founding of the New Left in 1960 as an editor of its largest magazine, Ramparts. He is the author, with Peter Collier, of 3 best-selling dynastic biographies, The Rockefellers, An American Dynasty, The Kennedys, An American Dream, and The Fords, An American Epic. Looking back in anger at their days in the New Left, he and Collier wrote in 1989, The Destructive Generation, a chronicle of their second thoughts about the 60s. Horowitz examined the subject more closely in The Radical Sun, published in 1996, a great book. A memoir tracing his odyssey from Red Diaper Baby to conservative activist, thank God. David continued his chronicle of the consequences of radical politics in The Politics of Bad Faith, Hating Whitey, Left Illusions, and The Party of Defeat. His Art of Political War, published in 2000, was inscribed by former White House political strategist, excuse me. I come from Brooklyn, I can't tell you. Karl Rove, as the perfect guide to winning on the political battlefield. David Horowitz is an American icon, fighting on college campuses to stop the radicalization of American universities and exposing the association, collaboration, and alliances with the Muslim Brotherhood vis-a-vis the Muslim student associations across America. Give him a round of applause for that. David has called into inquiries and political bias in the hiring of faculty and the appointment of commencement speakers. Mr. Horowitz has spoken at over 300 colleges and universities and continues to visit more than 30 campuses a year. He has appeared on Nightline, Crossfire, Today, Hannity, The O'Reilly Factor, Good Morning America, C-SPAN, CNBC, Fox News, and MSNBC. He is the founder of the David Horowitz Freedom Center and has a new book, A Point in Time, which we are selling right here tonight. Without further introduction, and to say that I am personally so honored to be sharing the podium with such a great American patriot, Mr. Horowitz, thank you for being here and joining the Arizona Republican Party, the Tea Party, and all the conservative movement in the state of Arizona. David Horowitz, everyone.
Thank you. As I was on my way down here, I was reminded once again that the battle for America, and not just America, but for freedom in the world, because since 1917 there's been no other country with both the will and the ability to defend the freedom of others than this country. That battle begins inside the Republican Party in our country. I received several emails over the last 2 days warning me not to come here to support Russell Pierce. And using the emails were signed by people claiming, pretending to be not only Republicans but conservatives, and using the worst epithets they could think of to describe Russell Pierce. So I'm going to begin by saying that Russell Pierce is an American hero, and I am proud to be here to support him. The man was in a hot air balloon on his way to meet a friend. When he realized that he was an hour late, and that the winds were taking him in directions he did not know, and in fact he was lost. He looked down on the ground, saw a woman, lowered the flame, and got to within earshot, leaned out of his basket and said, "Excuse me, ma'am, but I promised my friend I would meet him an hour ago. I don't know where these winds are taking me, and I don't really know where I am. Can you help me?" He looked up and said, "Sure. You're in a hot air balloon. You're 40 feet above the Earth's surface. You're somewhere between 39 and 40 degrees north latitude, and 69 and 70 degrees west longitude." Looks down at her and says, "Are you a Republican?" She says, "Yeah. How'd you know?" So, "Well, the information you've given me sounds like it might be technically correct, but I haven't the foggiest idea what to do with it. My friend is still waiting for me. I'm still late. I still don't know where I am or where these winds are taking me, and frankly, you haven't been any help." She looks up and says, "You're a Democrat, aren't you?" He says, "Yeah, how'd you know?" She says, "Well, you don't know where you are, and you don't know where you're going. You've risen to your present position on a large quantity of hot air. You've made promises you have no idea how to keep, and you expect me to solve your problems." Moreover, you're in the same predicament you were when I met you, and you managed to blame me for your situation. So we all laugh. But of course the joke's on us. The Democrats, the leftists, know how to frame an indictment and know how to attack politically. Every time, and that's where the title of this evening's talk comes from, every time I see a Republican squaring off with a Democrat, it looks to me like Godzilla versus Bambi. They call us racists, sexists, homophobes, Islamophobes, and we call them liberals. Liberals! What are they liberal about except sex, hard drugs, spending other people's money, and opening America's borders? Everything else, they want to control your life. Control your life. Why is this the case? Why do we call them liberals? Why are we so nice? Why are we so polite? I never see Republicans attacking in the kind of terms that Democrats do, unless they're attacking each other. They're calling this great American a neo-Nazi. Where do you think they got that language?
Democrats.
Of course. Who does this kind of attacking? Same thing happened to Ollie North some years ago in a primary in Virginia. It's those Republicans who really want to be Democrats, or approved by Democrats.
Yeah.
Why? And you see this everywhere. So this isn't an individual problem. It's a problem of the party. It's a problem of conservatives too. There are people of a certain age in this room, so you might know who Cardinal Mindszenty was. How many people remember Cardinal Mindszenty? Few. Cardinal Mindszenty was a Catholic cardinal in Hungary when the communists, backed by Soviet tanks, took over the country. And instead of fleeing the country, he went inside the American embassy and became the symbol of resistance to communism within Hungary and, of course, globally. When I left the left over 30 years ago, one of my first speaking engagements or invitations was from the Cardinal Mindszenty Foundation in St. Louis. So you would think this is the hardest of the conservative hardcore. And my gracious host introduced me. Here's David Horowitz, a former civil rights activist and peace worker. Now, I had enough good manners. Leftists don't have any manners, but maybe that's why I'm not a leftist anymore. Enough good manners not to want to totally embarrass my host, but I did have to correct it and say, no, sir. I was a Marxist revolutionary. If you had asked me who I was or what I was, that's what I would have said. And the only reason we were taking up the cause of blacks or any other cause was to bash America and bring it down. That's basically it. Leftists do not care, as I will come back to in a moment. They do not care about black Americans. They do not care about Hispanic Americans. They do not care about poor people. And we'll show you that in an instant. What they care about is their hatred for America, bringing it down. And you have to understand that to understand who you were up against. We're very good at criticizing, well, we criticize Bush, and we can criticize Obama and this administration for, of course, they sympathize with the enemy for not naming the enemy. That's one of the reasons they don't do it. You can't fight a war with an enemy that you can't identify. This isn't a war on terror, it's a war with Islamo-Nazis, actually. That's what it is. Why is this the case? Why, throughout the Republican Party and among conservatives too, are we so polite and are they so nasty? And it's over and over and over again. Why do your jaws drop when they call great Americans neo-Nazis? You should expect that. And I will tell you that one of the big differences since Obama, and we can be grateful to him for this, is that finally there are conservatives who don't give a damn when they're called names. Used to be, get out of the way. Do not invite the name calling. But why do they do it so naturally, and why is it so difficult for us? I can't really say us because I was born into the left, and I can do it as easily as they can. But people who weren't born into the left have a hard time. It's because conservatives and, let me call them progressives, these are people who think the world is going to change in a way that we haven't seen it change in 5,000 years, overnight. and everybody's going to be good to everybody. I mean, how to lunch is that? Well, but that's another part of the question. How can they be such idiots when it comes to understanding the problems we face in society? Conservatives, Republicans, learn their politics in the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, insofar as those are political organizations, in Rotary clubs, and in chambers of commerce. And they go to Washington, what's the capital of this thing, excuse me for that, or Phoenix, it is Phoenix. I was just in the state of Washington. Now for the life of me, remember that the capital was Olympia, not Seattle where I was. And they go to Washington to fix government. Basically, they're creative people, conservatives, come from the business world, have been schooled. I mean, you don't want to alienate customers, be nice to them. Your reputation as an individual is very important. Don't get into a pissing contest with a skunk. This is all bred. Be polite. My host of the Zen Foundation thought, it would be insulting. I just, described me as a Marxist revolutionary who was at war with his own country. I earned that. And it's not an insult, or if it's an insult, I deserved it. So Republicans go to Washington to try to, and they go understanding, as every conservative should, that the problem is us and it's really intractable. Really intractable. That people are the problem. It's not society that's the problem. Society just reflects, social institutions just reflect the messes that we are inside. It's a constant battle to keep ourselves and our children, on the straight and narrow. We all understand that. They're in serious denial about it. So Republicans go to Washington. Republicans generally are people who began by hating politics, feel that it's unclean and unpleasant, which it is, are bewildered when the other side lies all the time. And you do that, and we go to Washington or to Phoenix to fix government and get it out of the hair of the private sector, which is the creative part of our society. Leftists, Democrats, that's the appropriate term for them, by the way, leftists. Socialists is good. We're getting a lot better at these things. I like it. Leftists learn their politics in commie camps. That's what I went to. We called it a commie camp because it was run by the Communist Party, or socialist camps, and trade unions, which is the same damn thing, or an apocalyptic crusades to save the planet, which is the same thing. And they go to Washington or Phoenix to get power to change the world. There is nobody who describes themselves as, or is described as a liberal in our society, or a progressive, that doesn't believe that they're in a battle to change the world and make it a better place, capital B, capital P. What you're really seeing when you look at people on the left, in one form or another, is a religious cult. You may have noticed that when religion, organized religion, came under attack in the 19th century after Darwin, that is when the modern secular religions arose. Socialism, and that's what they called it. A famous French socialist called it the religion of humanity. That's what socialism is. They were going where religion had failed to make people cooperative, to make them socialists. Where religion had failed, socialism would succeed. And of course, the reason religion fails is because of us. We are the problem. All human institutions are corrupted by people, by the individuals who create them. So, when a leftist looks at what they're doing, when a Democrat, they're changing the world. They're bringing about a society in which there's no racism, no sexism, no poverty, no homophobia, no Islamic problem, no borders. It's that incredibly evil John Lennon song, Imagine. World, that impossible world. That's what they're all thinking about. And some of them think it can happen overnight, and some of them think it can happen in 2 weeks or a year if they get enough power. What they really are imagining is the kingdom of heaven on earth that they will bring about. There is nobody more dangerous than an individual who thinks he's on a mission to bring about the kingdom of heaven on earth. Because if you believe that you could create a world in which there was no conflict between races, between nationalities, no poverty, no war, what lie would you not tell to bring about that world, and what crime would you not commit or support? And that's why you see these progressives. They are the instigators of the worst atrocities of our lives and of the lives just preceding ours. They killed 120 million people in the communist world in peacetime. This is not like Hitler, who did it in wartime. And Hitler was another one of these leftist crypto-religionists who going to purify the world by getting rid of the Mongol races, of which he was a prime representative, by the way. that never makes sense, the other side. So, if you are a liberal, you see yourself as the army of the saints, and you see you as the party of Satan. I said that the Democrats know how to frame an indictment. If you want the archetype of the liberal, it's the fire and brimstone preacher. Only even the fire and brimstone preacher thinks he has a superior in God. These people are God. That's the way they think of themselves. They're going to create a new world. And that's why they're so dangerous, and that's why they're so nasty and mean, and it's why they go out to destroy the character of their opponents. They do not attack ideas, they attack people. There is no conservative who has stuck his neck out and stood up, and these days it's a lot of cheese who are doing it, that hasn't ignited the verbal assassins to destroy their character and ruin them. That is the modus operandi of Democrats. You see it all the time. In being a crypto-religion, progressivism, who could think that the future is going to be so much, this moral progress of mankind? Name me a worse century than the 20th century in terms of the number of people's lives that were ruined. Not only killed, but then they thrown them in gulags and create continental-sized poverty, starvation. There is no worse century than the 20th century. So much for moral progress. But in participating in this secular religion called progressivism or leftism or socialism or communism, I don't see any difference, by the way, between the analyses, if you will, of our country, between the ravings of Michael Moore or Nancy Pelosi, for that matter, and what I used to read in the Daily Worker when I was a kid in my parents' household. I tried to get people to use the phrase neo-communist, because that's what they are, but it's probably too late even for that. But enacted within this religion, they stumbled upon a political truth about democracy, about our democracy. And that is that what drives our politics is the romance of the underdog. Everybody in America thinks of themselves as an underdog. Just ask Martha Stewart. First of all, it's a very natural human tendency, and that's one of the reasons the world is a mess, always to blame somebody else rather than yourself for any problem. Who is self-critical? Certainly not publicly. Of course, to be self-critical publicly is death. So they understand it's always the us versus them. It's always there's an oppressor and there's the oppressed. There's a victim. And you are the champion of the victim. Now I will come back to my little remark about how leftists, liberals, Democrats, and progressives do not care about black people, poor people, and so forth. Here's how to turn that around. Republicans, by the way, when they talk about social problems, it's always, you're listening to accountants. There's waste. Not that waste isn't bad. Not that spending too much isn't really dangerous. All that is fine. But politics is about emotions. There's a lot of emotion in this room tonight because you think you're losing your country, and you are. That's what drives politics. Before Obama, politics for conservatives and Republicans was every 2 years or every 18 months when the election starts. I know this because I was in the trenches all this time, and it was very difficult to get particularly people in the Republican Party to focus on. Democrats are running around all the time in crusades. Save the planet. Save the squirrels. Save the transgender depressed. Everywhere. It's amazing how they can keep on coming up with new causes and new victims and so forth. But all that means political energy. Whereas if your life is absorbed by normal, decent things, like making a living, creating a business that serves people, going to the PTA, and so forth, you're not fired up all the time. And elections come and they go, and you probably didn't notice that the Democratic Party has been transformed into a totalitarian enemy within. It's who they are. I will get to that in a moment, what they've done. So when Republicans talk about schools, there's test scores, they're not doing so well. Should we really be paying teachers so much money for so little work? And so forth. Where are the victims? If you look at every inner city of size in America, because that's where the poor and the oppressed and the oppressed of color tend to be concentrated. What do you see? These are schools where half the children don't graduate. And among those who do, half of them graduate functionally illiterate, which means they'll never, ever get a shot at a decent life, at the American dream. Who controls those inner cities? Who controls the school board? Who controls the districts? Everyone 100%, 100% control, and have been for 100 years. Everything that's wrong with the inner cities of America, all that oppression, Democrats are 100% responsible for. That, insofar as policy can affect, there are other obvious causes. Republicans are way too polite to ever mention this publicly. You have a nightmare in Tucson.
Yeah.
You have an evil principal of that high school who's in bed with racists and child abusers. They're squashing the life out of kids as we speak, and across the country it's billions. The Republicans are too damn polite to ever mention it. We're in the midst of a great financial crisis. And actually, conservatives got onto it pretty quickly, that subprime mortgages had something to do with it. Now, I will say that Wall Street is much more guilty than the subprime. The derivatives, because if you couldn't securitize the subprime mortgages and sell them to other people and so forth, you wouldn't have had the house of cards fall down the way it did. And I will also say that some good conservatives were responsible for that. Phil Graham, who conspired with, I forget the opposite number, the Democrats. It was during the Clinton administration that they killed Glass-Steagall. I mean, we went through a Great Depression and got all these laws to prevent that, and then they just undid the laws. How clever is that? However, who are the victims? Who are the big victims of the subprime mortgage crisis? Who? Well, of course, it's all those poor people who Barney Frank snookered, and the whole Democratic Party went on, and of course Acorn, went on this big campaign and snookered into buying homes that they couldn't afford. Just think about losing your home and then get the idea of what that has done to those people. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Because when you are rising economically, what's your biggest investment? Your home. The black middle class in America has lost $100 billion thanks to Barney Frank, and the Democrats or Republicans are too polite to mention this. I hope if anybody in this room is running for office, that you school your speechwriters, or if you do your own model speech, that you put at the core of it the victims of these people, and call them by their right name, the oppressors, the racists in the Democratic Party, who don't give a damn about these things. This is not a simple problem to solve. Trust me on this. Whatever you think of the Iraq War, of the invasion of Iraq, which I've written a whole book about, and I support it 100% to this day. But it doesn't matter, because the leaders of the Democratic Party supported that intervention. Hillary Clinton, John Kerry gave eloquent speeches, insofar as Kerry is able to be eloquent, on the floor of the Senate, saying why Saddam Hussein was a menace and he had to be taken down by any means necessary. And that meant the authorization of the use of force in Iraq. Just to refresh your memories, we entered Iraq on March 19th, 2003. Saddam was toppled 6 weeks later, and roughly 8 weeks after that, the Democratic Party ran a national ad campaign saying that Bush had deceived the American people, that Bush lied, people died, that became the slogan of the Democrats. What changed in Iraq? Nothing. Our men and women were in harm's way. There was a resistance. It was a time to rally around our troops. But instead, the Democrats went on an attack that was worthy of I was going to say Al Jazeera, but Al-Qaeda. There are military people in this room. If you're familiar with psychological warfare, the first thing they say in the manual is attack the moral character of the commander of the other side. It happened to be George Bush. And the Democratic Party, in an act, consummate act of treason, attacked George Bush as a liar who was killing young people for no reason in an illegal war and as an aggressor. And the Bush administration never fought back. Why did the Democrats say that Bush had lied? Since they supported the war.
The 2004 election.
It was because they supported the war, and they had to explain how was it that 2 months after Saddam was taken down, they went back on their word, their support of the war, and stabbed our troops in the field, another thing that nobody said. Why not? Kerry said it was the wrong war in the wrong place at the wrong time. If you were a 19-year-old in Fallujah, surrounded by terrorists going house to house, and you hear a man with a hair's breadth of the presidency say you're fighting the wrong war in the wrong place at the wrong time, you think that might have an effect on your morale, on your ability to defend yourself? They got Americans killed, and Republicans were too damn polite to mention it. So why they lie? Why did they say Bush lied? Because how do you explain your treason? You have to have been fooled by somebody whom you were actually accusing of treason, which Al Gore said in so many words. It's okay for Democrats to say it, but not Republicans. Because they'll be attacked if they say it, the Republicans. And Republicans, when they're attacked, they duck. They run. That's why the Tea Party is so important. You don't run. So the Democrats had to say, to get themselves off the hook, that they had been lied to about the intelligence. That is the biggest lie of the Iraq War. Why? Because we still live in a democracy. And that means that the Democrats have access to every single bit of intelligence that the president has. It's called the Senate and House Intelligence Committee, on which John Kerry, Jay Rockefeller, and Dianne Feinstein, among other Democrats, sat. All they had to do, if they doubted the intelligence, was to summon George Tenet, a Clinton appointee who was the head of the CIA, to testify, to provide the intelligence. How the hell did the Republican Party let the Democrats get away with this?
Right. Can't fix stupid.
No, it's worse than stupid. It's a character defect. And I've tried to explain it. And the way to overcome it is to see this as a war, just the way the Democrats do. We are in a war for this country, for freedom, and we have to begin by understanding the other side hates us because it is a war in their eyes. They started it, we have to finish it.
Here, here.
That's why I call my little, actually it became a book, The Art of Political War. Of course, I'm accused by leftists all the time of being a warmonger, whereas it's very clear the war has been declared on us. It's the same thing with the Islamo-fascists. They declared the war, they attacked us. If there's a moderate Muslim, and I suspect that Arizona has the only one in the country. Oh, it was just a joke. So he asked me. You know them right away because they joined your side in the war against the Islamo-fascists. It's really simple. How difficult is it to condemn Nazi organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah by name? Not we are against terror because, of course, they think America is the terrorists. How difficult is it to say that building a mosque on ground zero, which apparently it's happening, is offensive? This is a tradition in Islam. And don't anybody tell me that Islam itself is not a problematic religion. Yeah. Christians worship a carpenter who preached peace and never did a violent act in his life. Muslims worship a warrior who massacred Jews and Christians, who preached that Islam had to be carried by the sword, as it has been everywhere it has triumphed. Hitler hid the final solution from the Germans because he thought they were too civilized. Didn't tell them that he was going to kill all the Jews. Ahmadinejad shouts it from the rooftops, and it's cheered by the Muslim. Where is the Muslim? One Muslim state out of 56, one that condemned Ahmadinejad for saying that, or for calling for the wiping out of America. Where are the Muslims who are standing up for the peaceful side of the religion? That doesn't mean there aren't Muslims who are peaceful. There are. Or good Muslims who actually want to live with other people alongside them. To do so, they have to defy the precepts of their religion, for one, and then they have to be willing to risk their lives, I guess. I fear for this country. We're in an advanced state. There is, how many of you know the term Islamophobia? I used it. So it was invented by the Muslim Brotherhood. And there have been several reports on the Islamophobes in this country, of which yours truly is, of course, one. Robert Spencer, Steve Emerson, Daniel Pipes, Brigitte Gabriel, Noni Darwish, Rafa Sultan, and so forth. And there have been several reports on, first of all, at the UN. The UN is by now an Islamic front, but even if it were after Islamic fascism, the greatest threat to America and to freedom in the world is the United Nations. It is governed by the Organization of Islamic, now they call it cooperation. The 56 states that are Islamic that are now trying to ram through Nazi regimes in the West Bank and Gaza and make them UN members. And why do I say Nazi? Well, because they call for the extermination of the Jews. That's really simple. They want to pass a law, a global law, outlawing Islamophobia. That is what you call a blasphemy law. Zero tolerance for blasphemy. It may interest you to know that the university, the student government at UCLA and UC Santa Barbara and UC Davis have already passed anti-Islamophobia resolutions which make anybody who refers to the inferior status of women in Islamic countries as an Islamophobe. 10-0 on each of the student councils. Not a single vote in opposition.
Sickening.
CARE, which is a Hamas front, put out a report. FAIR, which is a bunch of Marxist retreads, put out an Islamophobia report on us. And of course, it's the same. It's no different from the attacks on Russell. I mean, it just slanders. But recently, there was a 130-page report. According to the authors, it took a year to write, which means it cost $100,000 at least, by the Center for American Progress. How many people recognize that group? You want to know that group. This is the brains trust of the Democratic Party, created by Soros, headed by John Podesta. And one of the authors of the report is a jihadist who blames America for 9/11. In other words, the Democratic Party is now in bed with the Islamic enemy. And unfortunately, there are pieces of the Republican Party pretty high up that are too.
One here in Arizona.
Amen.
It's a long war, people.
Grover.
Blasphemy laws, or anti-blasphemy laws, are what this country was built on. Anti-blasphemy. Or, you know, that makes it hard. Let's say blasphemy law outlaws blasphemy. An anti-blasphemy law is not against blasphemy, it's against the law that outlaws blasphemy. That is a very convoluted construction. And why is that? Why is that the cornerstone of our freedoms? First of all, if you can't criticize, well, first of all, how is this country settled and founded? By religious refugees from state-sponsored religions like Islam. In Islam, there is no separation between church and state. It's only when they're inside a country like America and a minority that separation exists. If Islam triumphs in America, then it will impose Islamic law and you will have no freedoms. If you don't have the right, and that's why the First Amendment is the First Amendment. If you don't have the right to dissent, you don't have any rights. You can't defend them. You can't speak to defend them. And that's why these attacks are what they are on us, on our character. They're not designed to disagree with an argument. They can't win the argument about borders. You know, there is no country in the world that doesn't enforce its borders. Usually by shooting you if you cross them in defiance of them. So the argument has to shift to destroying you as a person. Now, the fact that I'm standing here shows that if you don't surrender, they can't kill you yet. That's why when they do get power, real power, they do kill you. In the past, it's been fairly easy to shut conservatives and Republicans up. Boo! And they're gone. Or they're apologizing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I do really mean that. So, I'm going to end this on a little up note. One of the reasons In addition, there is this little character issue, but a much bigger reason, or at least this bigger reason, that the left hasn't had more opposition is that most people aren't paying attention. This is the happiest insofar as our lot in life allows us to be happy at all. Happiest country on the face of the earth. America is just, there's so many opportunities everywhere you turn. So many, and not only opportunities to make money, but opportunities to enjoy yourself, to distract yourself. It's just all over the place. It's just, I remember I was in Poland in the last year of the communist dictatorship, and you go into the stores and there's nothing on the shelves. Everything is gray. And when you come back to a capitalist country, I mean, it's, you know, your senses are besieged by the variety of the goods, the this, the that. So that's life in this country. So, historically, we have a very hard time rising to the threat. In April 1941, Hitler had overrun all of Western Europe, except for the British Isles, which were holding out barely. Japan had overrun all of Southeast Asia, Manchuria. And Gallup conducted a poll among Americans. And he asked Americans, and Hitler, of course, they were screaming, they hated America. Pay attention when people hate you. Pay attention. Hitler hated America, the Japanese hated America. So Gallup ran this poll. And the question was, should America get involved in this war where most of the world is already gone? And where next? 80% of the American people said no. We should not get involved in the war. And then along came Pearl Harbor. And everything changed. We are a sleeping giant, and when you rouse us, look out. I believe the wake-up call began, of course it began on 9/11, but people go back to sleep very quickly. Very quickly. But a much more, well, it's hard to compare these things. Another huge wake-up call came when Obama became the President of the United States. What you're hearing tonight from me is something that I felt ever since I became a conservative. I understood how dangerous the left was. I was distressed to see conservatives always being nice to them. I still am every time I see Al Sharpton, a racist creep on Fox News. And I felt conservatives were very nice to me generally. And I had support. But I always felt like a Cassandra. Cassandra was the Greek seer who nobody believed. Tell her what's going to happen. Nobody believed her. Or a voice crying in the wilderness. Very, very frustrating. Until recently. And now, and one of the things that I did that I think has played a role in some of this awakening is to put up, if you're not aware of it, an encyclopedia of the left on the web called discoverthenetworks.org. But all of a sudden, here comes Glenn Beck. And of course, the first thing is he's attacked by Republicans as a nut job. The only guy speaking the truth to millions of people. That doesn't mean, obviously, that everything that Glenn Beck says I agree with. It's just, he got the basic thing right. These are leftists. Obama wants to bankrupt this country. He wants to destroy us as an international power. And then there were books came out. Andy McCarthy wrote a wonderful book called The Grand Jihad about the alliance. I have been warning people about the alliance between the Islamo-fascists and the American left. When I wrote the book, it hadn't penetrated the heart of the Democratic Party as it has. But suddenly, I had an immense burden lifted from me because other people were saying the same thing in their own terms. People were finally understanding the threat. And then along came the Tea Party, and I felt I could retire. People like your wonderful sheriffs here, the most important thing that's happened to this country in my lifetime. This is only the beginning. Don't lose your nerve and drop some of the politeness immediately.
How do you follow that? You know what Mr. Horowitz is saying is absolutely true. We have been timid. We have taken a back seat. We're afraid to show who we are. That's over, right?
Yeah.
It better be, or we're going to lose our country. Okay, I'm coming here to do a commercial. I'm going to be up here with Lisa. Where are you? Lisa Benson. Right behind. Okay, well, Lisa and I used to be Sonny and Cher years ago. And we're doing a commercial. What we're doing is, what we're asking tonight is for you to carry this message that this man has given, has rendered. This is an incredible message. It is true. And our very country is at stake. Now, you have a voice. You have a voice in the Republican Party. We are no longer timid. We're in their face, and we're going to stay in their face. We need you to help us do that. And the way we're going to do it, the only way we can do it is by getting the message out. We get the message out if we have the money to do it. The Democrats have no trouble getting the money so they can perpetrate the big lie. We have to answer the lie. We've got to be out in front of the lie. And we've got a job we've got to do. We've got to do it together. We have to defeat Barack Hussein Obama. We've got to take him out of office. I'm going to turn the mic over to Sharon, and she's going to tell you what we need to see happen. Thank you all. God bless you. Here's Sharon.
Thank you so much, Chairman. And thank you, David. I was privileged to be on the UC Irvine campus with David back in June, and with an audience full of people. He stirred me so much that I couldn't wait to bring him to Arizona, and hope to bring you back again. Thank you so much. In a few moments, we are going to break and have a VIP reception out in the courtyard. Those of you who have paid $100 to be here tonight will have some refreshments and have time to spend with David and ask him your questions. If you have not paid $100 and you would like to be with David tonight, and you've paid $20 to get here, that means you can pay another $80 and you can be with us for an hour or so. But let me just get back to this. I'm on the campaign trail with Gabby every week. And the chairman will tell you that the Democrats have vowed to make us a blue state. Are we going to be a blue state? No. So this is what we have to do. We have to educate our base with more speakers like David Horowitz. We have to have a GOP that gets the vote out. We have to have a rallying point. Giving to the candidates is important, and giving to the GOP is important. We want to make it painless. We can do it every month. You can take $5 or $10 out. Just let me know. Here is the envelope. Please buy David's book. Please join us out in the courtyard. Thank you for coming, and God bless. And God bless America.
pictures, and I need to get a picture with Horowitz. Picture with her and Horowitz. See.
You'll have to ask me this issue.
So.